He'd once held an account at this bank, saved up his first $40 to buy the old blue Schwinn off Toby. And where was Toby today? Last he'd heard, his friend had taken a job in Los Angeles, defying his fear of earthquakes. Today earthquakes were the least of Toby's worries. The sign in the window of Finley Lounge said it was open, the one establishment probably booming as a result of the crisis. For some of the news would go down better with beer. Mike walked by, unnerved by the thought of going in and meeting someone he might know. He wanted to talk to his mother and his father and Betsy, no one else. In a small, inexplicable way, he somehow felt responsible for the virus, though simply letting America in on a dirty little secret that they were all doomed hardly qualified him. He swallowed and walked on by Rogers' Heating, closed. Still not a soul on Central, or any of the side streets that he could see. Mike stopped and turned around. So quiet. The wind seemed oblivious to the virus it had breathed into this town. An American flag flapped slowly over the post office, but he doubted any mail was being delivered today. Somewhere, 1,000 scientists were searching for a way to break the raison strain's back. Somewhere politicians and heads of states were screaming for answers and scrambling to explain away the inconceivable notion that death was at their doorstep. Somewhere nuclear warheads were flying through the air. But here, in nowhere, America, better known as Finley, incorporated July 12th, 1926, all Mike could hear was the sound of wind. All he could see were vacant streets and a blue sky dotted with puffy white clouds. He suddenly thought that leaving his car had been a mistake. He should hurry back, jump in, and head to the protest march in Washington, where he was expected by morning. Instead, Mike turned on his heels and began to run. Past Dave's auto, on to Lincoln Street, to the end where the old white house his father had bought nearly 40 years ago still stood. He walked up to the door, calming his heavy breathing. No sound, no sign of life. He should at least hear the tube, shouldn't he? Mike bounded up the steps, yanked the screen door open, and barged into the house. There, on the sofa, facing a muted television, sat his mother, his father, and Betsy, surrounded by scattered dishes, half-empty glasses, and bags of Safeway brand potato chips. They were dressed in pajamas, hair tangled. Their arms were crossed, and their faces hung like sacks from their cheekbones. But the moment they saw him, their eyes widened. If not for this sign of life, Mike might have guessed they were already dead. "Mikey?" His mother jerked forward and paused, as if trying to decide whether or not she should trust her eyes. "Mike?" She pushed off the sofa and ran toward him, sobbing, engulfed him in a hug. He knew then that the march on Washington was the right thing to do. There was no other hope. They were all going to die. He dropped his head on her shoulder and began to cry. Chapter 1. Cara Hunter angled her car through the Johns Hopkins University campus, cell phone plastered against her ear. The world was starting to fall apart, and she knew, deep down, where people aren't supposed to know things, that something very important depended on her. Thomas depended on her, and the world depended on Thomas. The situation was about as clear as an overcast midnight, but there was one star shining on the horizon, and so she kept her eyes on that bright, guiding light. She snuggled the cell phone between her ear and shoulder and made a turn using both hands. "Forgive me for sounding desperate, Mr. Gaines, but if you won't give me the clearance I need, I'm taking a gun in there." "I didn't say I wouldn't get you in," the Deputy Secretary of State said. She should be talking to the President himself, Cara thought, but he wasn't exactly the most accessible man on the planet these days, unless, of course, her name was Thomas. "I said I would try, but this is a bit unconventional. Dr. Bancroft may— Excuse me." The phone went quiet. She could hear a muffled voice. Gaines came back on, speaking fast. "I'm going to have to go." "What is it?" "It's I need to know—" "I need to know. I may be the only link you have to Thomas, assuming he's alive. And Monique, for that matter, assuming she's alive. Talk to me, for heaven's sake." He didn't answer. "You owe me this, Mr. Secretary. You owe this to the country for not responding to Thomas the first time." "You keep this to yourself." His tone left her with no doubt about his frustration at having to tell her anything. But of all people, he must know that she might be onto something with this experiment of hers. "Of course." "We've just had a nuclear exchange," Gaines said. "Nuclear?" "More accurately, Israel fired a missile into the ocean off the coast of France, and France has responded in kind. They have an ICBM in the air as we speak. I really have to go." "Please, sir, call Dr. Bancroft." "My aide already has." "Thank you." She snapped the phone closed. Surely it couldn't end this way. But Thomas had warned that the virus might be only part of the total destruction recorded in the books of histories. In fact, they discussed the possibility that the apocalypse predicted by the Apostle John might be precipitated by the virus. Wasn't Israel featured prominently in John's apocalypse? She swerved to avoid a lone bicycler, muttered a curse, and pushed the accelerator. Dr. Bancroft was her last hope. Thomas had been missing for nearly 3 days, and Monique had disappeared yesterday. She had to find out if either was alive. If not here, then in the other reality. Bancroft was in his lab. She knew that much from a phone call earlier. She also knew that her brother's records were under the control of the government. Classified. Any inquiry about his earlier session with Dr. Bancroft would require authorization beyond the good doctor. With any luck, Gaines had given her at least that much. Kara parked her car and ran down the same steps she'd descended over a week earlier with CIA Director Phil Grant. The blinds on the basement door were drawn. She rapped on the glass. "Dr. Bancroft!" The door flew inward almost instantly. A frumpy man with bags under fiery eyes stood before her. "Yes, I will," he said. "You will? You'll what?" "Help you. Hurry." The psychologist pulled her in, leaned out for a quick glance up the concrete stairwell, and closed the door. He hurried toward his desk. "I've been poring over this data on Thomas for a week now. I've called a dozen colleagues. Not idiots, mind you. Not one of them has heard of a silent sleep brain. Did the Deputy Secretary of State— Just talk to them, yes. What's your idea?" "What do you mean by a silent sleep brain?" she asked. My coined term. A brain that doesn't dream while sleeping, like your brother's. There has to be some other explanation, right? We know he's dreaming, or at least aware of another reality while he's sleeping. Unless this," Bancroft indicated the room, "is the dream." He winked. The doctor was sounding like Thomas now. They'd both gone off the deep end. Then again, what she was about to suggest would make this dream business sound perfectly logical by comparison. "Oh, what's your idea?" he asked again. She walked to the leather bed Thomas had slept on and faced the professor. The room's lights were low. A computer screen cast a dull glow over his desk. The brainwave monitor sat dormant to her left. "Do you still have the blood you drew from Thomas?" she asked. "Blood?" "The blood work. Do you still have it?" "That would have gone to our lab for analysis." "And then where?" "I doubt it's back. If it is, then it would be in the lab upstairs. Why are you interested in his blood?" Kara took a deep breath. "Because of something that happened to Monique. She crossed over into Thomas's dreams. The only thing that links the realities other than dreams is blood. A person's life force, as it were. There's something unique about blood in religion, right? Christians believe that without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness of sins. In this metaphysical reality Thomas has breached, blood also plays a critical role, at least as far as I can tell. Go on. What does this have to do with Monique's dreams?" "Monique fell asleep with an open wound. She was with Thomas, who also had an open wound on his wrist. I know this sounds strange, but Monique told me she thought she crossed into this other reality because her blood was in contact with his when she dreamed. Thomas's blood is the bridge to his dream world." Bancroft lifted a hand and adjusted his round glasses. "And you think that—" He stopped. The conclusion was obvious. "I want to try." "But they say that Thomas is dead," Bancroft said. "For all we know, so is Monique, at least in this reality. The problem is the world might still depend on those two. We can't